Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and thank you very much, of course, for joining us. My name is Richard Rambarran. I am your host this evening, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce two gentlemen who are very well known, popular in the business community, and even to some extent nationally. With tremendous amount of experience with them, and they certainly have a number of interesting perspectives on very topical issues. These gentlemen are none other than the recently minted president of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Timothy Tucker, and then Mr. Paul Cheong, the chairman of NISIL, Guyana, the Berbice Bridge, and a director on two major enterprises rather in Guyana. And so it certainly brings me great joy to introduce these two gentlemen this evening. We will be speaking tonight, of course, as we usually do on this program, about Guyana's economic development. Of course, these two gentlemen being in and around the private sector, we will, of course, be touching primarily on business and Guyana's development. And we will also be including several components in the discussion on local content. So our topic for tonight, local content, business, and Guyana's development. For those who may not know, I'm Richard Rambarran, the host of the program, and I will also be acting as the moderator and perhaps contributing in some regards to you. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me, and it certainly is a pleasure to welcome you to Globespan.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for inviting us to join in this discussion.
Thank you, Richard. I mean, I look forward to sharing my views with the audience, and I know you all guys are doing a wonderful job at Globespan, and I look forward to us having fruitful discussion here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. So the very first thing I want to start us off with is Timothy on this point. Tim, you have recently been elected as the president of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, a portfolio to which you have been around for several years in supporting capacities as vice president, etc. The Chamber has been one of those organizations leading the forefront and the charge about local content. My question to you is one which is popularly discussed, and I want us to start the discussion off there regarding local content. Do you think, Tim, that local content is important for Guyana's development? I want us to start there. If you can perhaps provide your views, and then Paul, you can also do the same.
Sure. Local content is vital to the development of this country. You can't develop a country, right, without utilizing the local businesses, the local personnel, involving the local people. It's impossible. It's basically renting a piece of land and and packing up and leave after going. And unless you develop that land, right, and put infrastructure in on that land, then there's no way that there's to really be development. Everything else would just be temporary and portable. So local content is an important piece of policy or legislation that encourages, or should I say, makes sure that whatever is there garners is developed, and it garners the kind of development that you need, right, in terms of your people, right? So it is wide, it is important, it is, local content is just not just one thing. It's a series of events, because it's not just developing your people, but it is actually building a nation, building a country, right? You know, it's completely in the benefit of the lives of everyone. It's a holistic. It's from your grocery store to your electricity to everything that surrounds you, and especially when it comes to business. You know, so local content, without a doubt, it is the backbone of developing this nation. I mean, if you go back into the history, you can say that if local content wasn't developed in the sugar industry, right, then we would have had cane farmers today. We wouldn't have, you know, if you didn't have that transfer of knowledge into the process, right, then when the country became, when, you know, slavery was over, indentureship was over, and the whole working process. I mean, that's the oldest possible way of local content.
Definitely. And certainly you touched on a number of things there that I think will be very important for us moving forward on this discussion tonight. Paul, I just want to hear perhaps your thoughts, and then I want us to have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion regarding local content on some of the points Timothy would have.
Yeah, Richard and Timothy. With the advent or the discovery of oil, and you know, with the extraction of that commodity, it's the adaptation, process has begun. Local content will help us to build capacity. It will help us to, develop in other industries and move forward. Use the gains from the oil industry to develop ICT, develop agro-processing, develop manufacturing, develop, deep water harbor, and so many other stuff that the country can benefit from in the long term. Remember, the oil, we don't know for how long, that extraction will take, before it's completely depleted. But having a good, strong local content policy would enable the population in the country to develop and grow and lift them out of poverty. As we all know, Guyanese have been living, a lot of Guyanese have been living below the poverty line. But also, it requires, and I know a lot of businesses which we must commend have taken great steps in lifting their profile and the way they do business. It also requires not only business, but the employees, the whole country to lift their whole view and level of service, capacity, everything, to come on board and get involved. So it's the policy is one, but you need a more holistic coming together of all the players to make this a success. But it's very important that we are successful at this for the country to grow and develop in the way in which it should. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, Paul. Definitely. And, Timothy, I've heard you allude to this in some of the local content public forums that you have been on. And Paul, of course, hinted at it. And he through mentioning the term holistic. Tim, do you believe that local content should be something that is a national policy or a national legislation on local content? Or do you think that it ought to be specialized for the oil and gas sector? And if it is, you believe that it is national, should it be for all sectors? Should it be for subsectors? I'd just like to know your thoughts on something of that nature.
Richard, from going back from our first conversation with the then Minister of Natural Resources, Raphael Trotman, at the Chamber, my position has always been a national local content policy. There are too many industries. Guyana has more than one extractive industry, right? And strong local content requires us especially when the costs of electricity goes down, when all the different benefactors of an oil economy, right, will garner internally that you will need a national local content policy. There may be a requirement for a phasing of it. That is to be determined by the policy writers. But the fundamentals of it is that you need a national local content policy. You need local content immediately in the oil and gas sector so that we can capture the things that we need to capture locally, because you know that the exploration, right, and production, and the beginning of production, that whole exploration to production stage is where majority of the money is spent. And we have a few additional development wells that are going. That whole connection there is where the bulk of the money, when the oil is found and the FPSOs are put in place, then the money will, that high spending will come down and level off. Yeah. And by that time, we must capture the bulk of the spending. Beyond that, that's where local content policy for government spending comes into place, because the country by itself will rise out of as Paul alluded to earlier, the economic issues that the country has. We are at the point where we're somewhat halfway through the door, so to speak, in terms of our development. We are upper middle income economy. Yeah. That now, by having that status, we don't qualify for a lot of things. A lot of the donor funding that we get, we are about to not qualify for that because of our economic status as a country. So when you now have that, and you will have more government spending, majority of the money that the government will earn will be from oil and gas related, and of course the development of other things. So that is the point where it becomes important that the local businesses Guyanese and the whole, let's just say Guyanese must benefit from all of that spending. Not entirely. There are things that we can't do. We don't want to be a isolated state where we are just, you're going to only encourage, nationalism. But at some point we've wanted development. So when we get development, we must benefit from it. It mustn't be like so many of the other countries that have gotten oil before us, where people come in, develop themselves, and then they leave, and there's no real development in that country. We look at Trinidad, right? They have had oil for over 100 and something years. Trinidad is quite developed, but they realized after a very long time, I think it's only 2004, when they put into the place their local content policy. So that shows that they realized that it was a straw in a glass story. Everything was being sucked out and nothing was really being kept there. So, yeah. So that definitely the policy. I think that, from my opinion, there should be a national policy. If the government wants to slowly implement that in a built-out way, but I would like to see a national policy.
Yeah, and legislation.
Of course, we have to. You have to have legislation, and the reason for that is that you must have consequences to when you have players that are not adhering to the local content guidelines, and so you must have consequences. Companies that are trying to hoodwink the nation by having rent-a-citizen type of scenarios, or companies that just plain out refuse to adhere to a policy, then you have to have repercussions for those actions, and that is where policy legislation comes into play, because legislation can enshrine into the Constitution penalties for those things, where they get jail time, heavy fines, and things like that.
Yeah, thank you for those thoughts, Timothy. And certainly there are a myriad of benefits that can accrue to a national local content policy. Paul, I have a question for you in a similar vein. Mm-hmm. You are, of course, either on the board or directly involved with many state agencies or private enterprises. And of course, having a national local content policy will have implications for those enterprises and how procurement, etc., is done and such like. What are your thoughts from your vantage point? Do you think that this content should be expanded to a national local content policy, or do you think that we should stick within the context of oil and gas?
No, we need to broaden it. We need to.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Cheong. Would you be able to just move back a little bit? We aren't able to see. Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, we need to broaden it, as I said. To include, a more national local content policy, right? So that it would create more benefits. But also, as you touched just on, the legislation are important part of this, right? You have to have strategy for building capacity, right? So, just putting in the local, doing the policy is one aspect, but you have a myriad of strategy that has to be developed for the country to benefit, because we want the industry also to grow, right? You don't want it, systems to be put in place to hinder. But so not saying that we need to have the policy, we need to have the legislation to support the policy. I mean, for penalties and what have you. We also need to have programs in place with the university, with using also the oil companies, getting them to train people to provide some of the services that they need, because a lot of these things are new to us here in Guyana, and we need to build capacity and build capacity quickly. So there has to be, linking all of these things, together, so that the people would have the capacity and the country, the economy would develop. And you have more spin-offs than just the little revenue that you will get from the oil and gas, the selling of the oil or selling of the gas. And that's where, we will be able to empower the people of this country and make their lives better.
Yeah, definitely, Paul. I think a very important point that a lot of persons miss regarding oil and gas is and local content in particular is the long-term benefits that will accrue to the country in terms of the fact that you build a more internationally competitive private sector. You build a private sector that is capable to come in terms of supply, expanding its capacity and such the like. Timothy, I have another question for you, and this is of course tangentially related. Now, we do have in Guyana the Center for Local Business Development, which is of course, as we know, funded by ExxonMobil, and this center operates as a business development unit. Now, do you think that within the national landscape, it is necessary for government to perhaps re-examine the role of institutions such as the Small Business Bureau, perhaps Go Invest, or even including new institutions focused on business development? Or do you think that this should be left to the market, for the market itself to take care of businesses who will, as we say, prosper or die, or compete or die? What are your thoughts on that?
In a capitalist market, you would leave it to do just what you said just now. Let it develop or die. But unfortunately, we have 750,000 people in Guyana, right? We have people who, we have a country that's been, over the years, and I really dislike this term, but I'm going to get it right out there. I mean, you have had people saying over the years that Guyana had a brain drain. So if you're going to say that you have a brain drain, there's low capacity, and so that means you cannot leave it for the capital markets and for its own generic development. You really have to now put the things in place to take what you have and build it. And that is why I believe strongly that you need the businesses in the country, small, medium, large businesses, need the support. You need the Small Business Bureau, you need the Center for Local Business Development, you need Ministry of Business, we need to have the University of Guyana, SEBI, the GTI, TVET, we need more institutions. We need to have, and I think there's something that the GCCI is looking for, to see how we can help in the process of building capacity for our members. We have to build relationships with the University of the West Indies, with universities outside of the country, to have more training, more education, more programs, more short courses, more mental training. Because you got to understand, people are working. A lot of us don't have the time to go and sit down in the university when we're trying to feed our family. We may be able to come home at the nights and do a few hours, but we're living in a country that we have to find money for so many things. If you want to, it's not a country where at the moment you turn on every single pipe and you're getting water all the way up in your house. No, you got to buy a tank, you got to buy a pump, right? You got to have security, you have to have a dog, you have to have all these different things. This is a situation, this is a country that is building, right? So have everything that we would like to have at this point in time. So everybody has to work and physically get out there and do stuff. So then we really need the support of short courses, business development. We need to have the training, the facilities, night classes, weekend training programs, occupational health and safety, HSSE. We need to have, people be able to go do night school to learn how to weld, how to do fabrication, how to, different things you need for development. Sorry, am I breaking up?
I think perhaps, Paul, you might have to mute your mic during the time when Tim is speaking. Yeah, Tim, you want to go ahead? Let's try this now.
Yeah. So we really need to have that that support, and I think as a country we are 5 years behind this. We should have had a good, strong petroleum programs. We should have had all of the necessary institutions already built in offering different programs already in oil and gas sector, so that we can develop. You and I know the situation about the ability to have agro processors, to bring them up to standard and things like that. A lot of the chamber has reached out and helped them, right? And without GCCI helping those agro processors, they had no other way of getting to the stage that they are at this moment. So it goes to show that yes, we need to have government come in, step in, and help in the developmental process.
Thanks for that, Tim. I think we are still getting a little bit of the feedback in the background.
Trying to take off my mic. All right. Try again now, Timothy.
You all hear me clear now, or no? It's still some feedback.
Yeah, Devin, any suggestions there?
No,
Yes, can you go ahead now?
You hear me clear?
Yes, I am hearing.
Yes, you could go ahead now.
Yeah, I think so. Would you need me to repeat, or that's okay?
Maybe just the last part, just the very final part.
Yeah, I mean, I did say that the GCCI would have engaged in a process of helping agro processors and getting those agro processors up to standard. And without our input, right, and through funding from the CDB, as you know, there's nothing out there to help those agro processors reach to that stage where they're about. I mean, we know that we're taking them right up to GMP certification, you know, and HACCP certification, and those are the things that people really need. That's their help, because it is not something that everybody is accustomed to, those standards. And that's just an example. There's so many other industries that we don't know the international standard for those industries, because in Guyana we accept whatever it is. Our bureau standards, yes, we have standards, but how much of us actually took the time to read the bureau standards, policy, or standard for that particular sector that we are in, right? And of course, that is the important reason why education, capacity building, training, and the government needs to invest the money in that, because we know from the private sector the cost for us to do something like that. Those 25 agro processors, you yourself know, it's about 150,000 US just to get them certified, right? And it's only so much that we can do. So that kind of cost for a small business, right, it's virtually impossible for them to do without the support of a government or a big international donor agencies such as the CDB and IDB and all the things that they would have done for us.
Yeah, and I've always said this, Tim, that I think that that's where programs like what Action Coach, for example, that Vishnu Durga does, and Masterclass Institute that Roshkan does, and so on. These programs play a very important role for the private sector in terms of its development. But Tim, you have recently been elected as the president of the GCCI, and I know that the GCCI couples as an advocacy body as well as a business support service organization. Now, you have highlighted a number of issues there, and naturally, you have pointed to some of the things that the chamber has done in the past. But under your vision and your leadership during this 1 year, 10 years that you have thus far been elected for, what are some of the things that you plan to do from that post as the president of the GCCI? What new can the public expect from you?
I'm definitely going to be on the agenda of pushing the chamber and pushing the chamber first in terms of the development of local content. The other thing that we're definitely going to do is, I noticed, anyway, I thought it was stuck. Yeah, definitely one of the things that, some of the things that we're going to do is push more small business and small business training, small business capacity building for small businesses. The chamber, I plan to reach out to a lot of the institutions worldwide that would support the private sector development. I know that we would have been in talks previously with computer training for the private sector through the Center of Excellence, which was donated, that facility is donated by the Indian High Commission. I know that we are going to try to utilize some of those scholarships for private sector and development. We want to connect with some of the major universities worldwide so that we can find short courses that we can allow our membership to access. We want to work closer with the Small Business Bureau and the Ministry of Tourism, Industry and Commerce so that chamber can be the gateway to accessing finance from those institutions. How we can assist our members, the small businesses, to put their thoughts on paper into a document, into a plan, present it to those agencies for funding. And those are some of the things, and not just small and micro enterprises, but I would like to do this with some of the larger donor agencies, and we have good relationships with them via our forums that we would have done previously with the business development forum that we did. We have had. That was an excellent collaboration with IDB to support of business and business development training, ideas, how to put your stuff on paper, how to register your business, how to open a bank account, check your credit info, your credit rating, and really streamline your business. And you know that we would have worked with companies like Action Coach, Masterclass. We had the commercial banks, we had iPad. You know, we need to tell the small businesses these are the places that you can get money. And not just tell them this, you get money, because lots of small businesses, you go to one of these institutions and they said, okay, could you do you have your business plan? Like, business plan? What you talking about? I got an idea. So the business plan needs to put in paper. You need to have all the different parts of the business plan vetted and written, and not a lot of people can write a successful business plan or to even capture their thoughts or their ideas on paper. So you need agencies like the GCCI to help those businesses do that, and to go out there and have a better chance, a fighting chance, to get funding for their ideas or to grow their businesses.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Tim. I think that you have highlighted a very important point there in terms of what businesses, what type of support private sector itself can offer its own self in terms of advancing. MSMEs, of course, have their own peculiar issues that come with them, and you have aptly highlighted many, including the inability to garner the requisite funding to help support themselves and standards. And this is, of course, naturally where business support organizations, etc., come into play. And so I want to, of course, pivot the discussion once again. And since we've really explored that thematic area quite a bit, I want to pivot the discussion once again and ask Paul's opinion on this. Paul, we have heard for many years that the private sector in Guyana is the engine of growth. But of course, as with any developing economy, there are a number of issues that continue to plague and or affect the private sector. Of course, you have decades of experience in and around the private sector. And what would you say are perhaps the 2 or 3 most burning issues that affect the private sector? And how do you see this government, the Irfan Ali administration, moving towards or taking steps to address those? Devin, I think we might have to unmute Paul. Yeah.
Paul, you're muted.
Good, you hear me now? Yeah. When you look at Guyana as a country, we have a small population, right? So for businesses to expand and grow, you need to export. For the local private sector, particularly manufacturers, then. For manufacturers, they need to export if you want to bring in a large factory that can give you some amount of economies of scale and produce so that you can be competitive. You need to export. Some of the big issues that affect manufacturers, and deal with manufacturers, are energy costs. I mean, when you compare our energy costs here in Guyana to that in Trinidad, I mean, it's day and night, right? We need to, for our businesses to be competitive, we need to fix that. I knew, I mean, in 2015, between 2011 and 2015, there was a hydro power project that was the Amelia Falls project that was online, and I mean, to come on stream. And that would have been a marvelous thing for this country. It will transform Guyana in a big way. The amount of money we spend on electricity or the fuel that we need to run those plants, I mean, all of those would have been savings. Because I don't want, I mean, we spoke a lot, and that's one issue that we have. The other issue is the cost of freight, right? Because we don't have a deep water harbor, you know, the cost of bringing in materials here is expensive, right? So when you have to compete with like Trinidad or any other country, I mean, those costs, your energy, your freight, it adds up. The third issue that businesses is the cost of capital or the cost of finance. I mean, again, you know, our cost of finance in this country is extremely high. And if we want the economy to grow, if we want businesses to expand and develop, we need to get those three things fixed and fixed urgently. I know there are plans to bring the natural gas to shore, which I think, I mean, would also have a lot of positive benefits to the manufacturers and to the whole country, because I mean everybody uses energy. I mean this is not only for manufacturing, the household, the people who are involved in commerce, right? And everyone. I mean for the freezing the stuff, rely on electricity. So all of those that would be a transformative project similar to the hydro. We saw the hydro would have been able to transform Guyana, the manufacturing sector. But again, we need to fix the other two. We need to fix the freight rates, which it has to do with the Deepwater Harbor, and we have to fix be able to get better borrowing rates for businesses, so that they can grow and expand and do it competitively. Because most everything that we do here, we're not an island by ourselves. We have to do it, as I said, I mean, to compete with the other Caribbean and even further field countries.
Yeah, definitely, Paul. I saw Timothy nodding his head in reassurance there, because he has been on public record several times talking not only about energy and the need for deep water harbor, etc., but most popularly perhaps is the cost of borrowing in Guyana. Certainly financial sector development is something which we need here in Guyana, various avenues in which we can actually finance businesses, and ensuring that we develop the financial sector becomes very important. I'll take perhaps I'll modify a question a bit here that from a comment that somebody has sent in the chat box, and perhaps I can direct it to Tim. Tim, this one, the person says, well, I'll quote not verbatim or paraphrase, and I'll turn it into a question. We have already exported in Guyana timber, gold, bauxite, seafood, rice, and now we're going to export oil. So the person just puts, tell us what those exports have done for poor people over the years. But I want to just switch that a little bit, and perhaps ask, what do you think about the oil and gas sector and the way that we are approaching it will make it different from large-scale gold mining, large-scale timber production, and all of the other large-scale industries which we have done over the years?
You know me, I would answer the person's question. The main fact that we have a country is clear evidence of what those things have done for everybody. I mean, without the sugar industry, right, half of the cane cutters, you know, there's a whole ripple effect of that has been elaborated on many occasions.
And that's why I didn't ask you the person's question.
I know, but I mean, I'll get to the oil part. The gold mining sector, come on, if you go to the communities in and around those gold mining sectors, you will definitely see what it has done for those people. The problem with it is it's not the most efficient way of gold mining, and a lot of it damages the environment, and that's where you come into play. Yes, the larger scale miners, of course, benefit more from it, right? If you look at the logging industry, a lot of small and medium-sized loggers, and if you go to rice, the rice farmers, without an exception, Paul said just now, the cost of paddy would stay stagnant locally because you would only have the local demand, which can't sustain that industry. So most of it, without there is a trickle down effect. You may not have as much, and because of the cost of electricity, that we can't add value. We can't make those industries more value added, right? Because of the cost of electricity, because the cost of shipping, and it goes back to the three things that Paul pointed out, right? So clearly those industries, the reason why you haven't had major development is because of the three things that Paul referred to. But you can say that we have a country and we have people living in this country because of the effects of those industries and the same small people that are doing, because those small people are empowering the communities in small ways to purchase from the major manufacturers, importers, suppliers, distributors, everybody, the whole value chain. The oil and gas sector is important because we don't have the mechanisms in country to utilize the products that industry is extracting. So because we don't have it, right, we have to export it. And that is why it's vital that we have a local content so that we can capture the things that we don't like the things that we capture from the other sectors. Whereas the transportation, the gasoline, the mercury, the timber, the rice, the sugar, the cane cutters, and everything from those industries, we would not be able, because we have an oil and gas industry which we don't know anything about, that we have to bring people in to spend 2 weeks to do. It's like if you have a gold mine in the interior and you bring somebody in, so 2 weeks they extract the gold, they take the gold, and the person flies back out, right? Then we would all go in the street and protest, right? But the bottom line is that that's why the purpose of we don't want anarchy. We want a structured something that gives us an opportunity to benefit from this extractive industry and to have the windfalls and the trickle down effect. Because unlike those industries, this is a high demand industry. This particular natural resource is on very high demand worldwide. So the cost of that industry supersedes any other industry that we ever had before, and that will have a bigger effect, right, with the ripple.
Yeah,
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it definitely does. Because a lot of persons, I don't think they understand or have fully grasped the fact that what is important in the oil and gas sector is not just the sector itself and the revenues that accrue from the sector to the government, which is one discussion by itself, the contract and whether it's a good or a bad contract and what percent we get, etc. But it's how the private sector is able to catalyze itself, develop itself, and all of what I term the peripheral industries that support the oil and gas sector, how those are developed to actually drive the country forward. Now, the oil and gas sector itself has what we call in economics and economic development one of the greatest multiplier effects, in the sense that it not only spurs on one industry, but it has the ability to drive construction, entertainment, hoteling industry, tourism, etc. And this is where I think it's important that we as a country understand what those complementary sectors are and support the development of those complementary sectors. I saw someone making a very good point here also in the comments box. They said, we have to move the value added to realize our full potential. Raw materials and their commodities by themselves are not good enough to generate foreign exchange. Now, Paul, of course, you have identified a few of the constraints that have affected the development here. But Paul, we have had a number of issues over the years in terms of development of our exports in particular. Now, when we look at the internal market of Guyana, it's a very small market, 750,000 people. But then when we look to the Caricom region or even to northern Brazil, for example, you have a market that totals in excess of 25 million people combined. What are some of those barriers, maybe a couple of them that you see, Paul, that really affect the export of our Guyanese products to these markets? I think we have to unmute you, Paul. Yeah.
Mr. Cheong, can you click the unmute button on the bottom left? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I said some CARICOM countries, and I'll be bold enough to say, like Trinidad. I mean, they put a lot of non-tariff barriers on products from Guyana. It's very, very difficult. And I've been involved in exporting products in this country for a long time, right? And we build brands across the Caribbean and in North America. So when I talk about the freight rates, I know what I'm speaking about. Well, I also know, I'm talking Trinidad, they put a lot of non-tariff barriers on our products. So we've known about the honey issue. We know about even pineapple, a lot of agriculture products. I mean, they've put non-tariff barriers on them so that we can't thing. And the issue that their products get in here, quite easily, which is unfair, to the business people, in Guyana. But coming back to some of the issues, though, we need to develop proper marketing strategies to get our products out. Apart from that, we need to also our costs, because our cost is a big factor. Because if we can produce, you can produce anything, but you got to produce it to sell. And you have to know what price you can sell it for. So you have to produce at a cost lower than that price. If we produce something, and it's the price is higher than what the market is paying for it, then the people logically they won't buy that. So it comes back to those factors. The freight, it carries up your costs. The energy, it carries up your costs. The cost of finance and the access also to financing. Right, not only the cost, the access to financing is also takes up your costs. So apart from those things, you need to develop proper marketing strategies, and because it's a different level out there. Than when you're selling only in Guyana. We know we have a lot of small manufacturers. I know GMC. Doing some work with some of the and has been doing work with some of the manufacturers to help them to bring them up to those levels. But still, we have a far way to go. With our quality standard and to maintain it. And it's important because as our country developed, we see a lot of right now. We see a lot of Chinese product coming in and flooding the market here, and those things they're going to drive more and more of our producers out of business. So we need to lift our game. We need to get the field level so that our manufacturers and our business people in this country can play level. Because I'm sure the Chinese they have access to funding at a very, very low rate. Right, so that they can come in and compete with us hands down. You see right through in Region 3 they take, So it's important that we be able to fix these things if we want our business sector to grow and develop and expand.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Paul. And that's the reason why I directed that question to you, because a lot of persons may not know what you rightly stated. You have been involved in building international brands that come out of Guyana for quite some time, and you have been involved in export also. Timothy, it's very strange having a discussion, and you are not the one mentioning on in Trinidad non-tariff barriers and so on. But certainly, Paul has given us a good ability to segue into something else, which I wanted for us to discuss. Now, how do you plan to approach, Tim, these existing non-tariff barriers as the president of the GCCI? I know you've been involved in advocacy. And do you think that we ought to leverage our new position as an oil and gas, a nascent oil and gas producer, to eliminate many of these non-tariff barriers?
I have, I think it's myself and the former president of the chamber, Deodat Indar, had made that point back in 2017, or it was 2018, when Prime Minister Rowley came to Guyana to sign a MOU with the government, with the then government. And we said, don't sign any MOU until you use that MOU, because that was an MOU on energy, on petroleum MOU. And we said, do not sign any MOU until you have use that MOU to leverage the removal of the non-tariff barriers. It's ridiculous. We don't even want to carry honey to Trinidad. We don't get that amount of money that we would get in Trinidad for honey. It is more lucrative for the field. And because we have honey, if a lot of people don't know, is actually unique to its location. So our honey, of course, is very lucrative. It's important that we get our exports, and we would have said, to use this newfound wealth to leverage and get these barriers removed. They have an economic crisis. They have a foreign currency crisis. They have a lot of their businessmen coming here, and they're setting up and doing business in Guyana pretty freely because Guyana is a free market. Now, Trinidad is not a free market. Trinidad, it's if you go back to the insurance industry, you would see that the insurance industry, a lot of the insurance companies that we had here in Guyana that were Guyanese, or just the Guyana-based insurance companies, had to remove their headquarters from Guyana and take them to Trinidad when Trinidad imposed that local content policy. So things like that, we have to use our newfound wealth and all the investment opportunities that the people are coming from, and not just Trinidad. I'm talking about use your leverage to create open markets for Guyanese businesses exporting to Suriname, to Trinidad, to Brazil, to the whole Caribbean. You and I, Richard, would have sat with the former chairman or former chairperson of Caricom, Prime Minister Mia Motley, where we said these exact same things. That either we have some sort of negotiating or a free trade. The purpose of Caricom is free trade and movement of goods and peoples and services, and either Caricom lives up to that or Guyana should leave Caricom. There are benefits, of course, for us staying in Caricom, but at this point in time, if the negatives outweighs the positives, then you come to a different scenario. But of course, from a country standpoint, we have to leverage our ability to now be the real breadbasket, because there in so many terms, we not just mean putting groceries inside of a basket and what we can do there, but in actual fact, employing and bringing services and employing people and creating business. The diversity, the epicenter of business in the Caribbean will become Guyana. The development of Guyana will probably take almost a Caribbean effort in terms of what capacity that is needed. So when we look at things like that, we have to leverage this kind of development to clear the way for our manufacturers and the people that are exporting, because we have to get foreign currency coming into this country, right? So our dollar does better, so that we can bring down the cost of borrowing, because the cost of borrowing is tremendous. It makes it unproductive, right, for us, because even if you bring down the cost of electricity, man, 16% interest rates on a commercial loan. Richard, I don't even want to get started on the cost of borrowing. I'll let Paul take that tonight, because you know me and that. I'd probably get all my bank accounts closed tomorrow.
But Tim, you've raised a very important point there, and clearly, with regarding Guyana and Caricom, all has not gone well. We are actually one of the 4 founding members of Caricom. What do you think we can do? And this question goes to both of you. What do you think that we can do to improve the benefits that accrue to Guyana as a member of Caricom? What can we do? At the end of the day, this is something that we are all a part of currently, and in the absence of being a part of it, we can leave. But let's look at what we currently have. But what can we do? Tim, perhaps as you're unmuted, you could, and then Paul.
We definitely have to, in order to first to figure out what we have to do, we have to take stock of what is working and what isn't working. And that's what I've been asking for 2 years. How does this agreement that we have, even though we're the founder member of Caricom, even though we are, the headquarters is based here, we definitely need to take stock of it, see what is working, what isn't working, and how we can benefit from this. Because there are countries in Caricom that have utilized and worked Caricom and to their benefit, without actually fully supporting the concept that created it in the first place. So as a country, right, we need to use our position right now to create a level playing field for our business community. We need to consult. If we're going to bring down the cost of borrowing, then we either need to consolidate in terms of, I know there is a funding that was going on between the private sector in Caricom to kind of focus in certain areas to lend money, put it together a fund to develop a developmental fund. And what we would need to do is to look at the areas that we need help and where we can leverage our power points versus our weak points, and then get a standard, get Caricom to agree on one quality standard, one high phytosanitary standard. Not change it every time Guyana reaches to a point where we reach to this standard, and then you say, oh, we can move the goalposts. That is what we see. Those are the non-tariff barriers that we talked about. So we need to take charge of and get Caricom to say, listen, for once and for all, this is the Caribbean standard. Everybody's okay with it, and this is what we're going to use. Barring that, then we start looking at bilateral relationships with countries that will have our benefit and that will be beneficial to us, mutual beneficial to us. So going back to the original question, Richard, I think in order for me to tell you exactly what is needed, we have to first take stock of what is the issues, and I know that's a situation that we're still working on. We know some of the issues have been documented, but it's a deeper issue, and we really need to level the playing field, force a level of the playing field.
Yeah, Paul, I see you smiling there as Timothy is making some of these comments. we have been dealing with. So what are your thoughts on those? I think we need to unmute Paul.
Mr. Cheong, sorry, can you just unmute once again? Yes, there you go.
That's okay. Yeah. Well, what I'm saying, I mean, Richard and Timothy and viewers, integration is important. It's important because no man is an island. It's just like a family. You need you need you need all your family members then. But at the same time, it's important that the rules of the game is administered in the same way for everyone. If not, you will create problems. Some people are going to get, frustrated. For want of a better term. I'm just trying to put in a layman term here. People don't get frustrated. So if we want integration to happen successfully, as I say, we need everybody to be treated in the same way. And just like, in some are taking advantage of the situation. We've seen that in Caricom. We've experienced it. And that is the hurtful part of this whole process and the integration. So we have to fix that. And I know, they say the golden rule is the man who got the goals make the rule. All right? And that was been happening because Trinidad, because of the oil wealth, and so they bulldoze everybody else. But now I think, Timothy made the point, we're in a different position now. So we have to change and adapt to our position that we have, right? And use that for the benefit of the Guyanese people. For too long, we've been trampled in Caricom in more ways than one. Right, we've been trampled, and we've been we have to change that. Right, I'm not saying that we shouldn't allow people to come into this country because we need that to develop Guyana. But at the same time, we have to use that leverage to get the other countries, those who are not playing by the rules, to get them to do that. I take typical example. Sugar is imported into Trinidad without applying any CT. And that affects the price Gaisuko can sell sugar for in that country, because you have to compete with the other sugar that are coming in there with no CT. They've been doing that for years, right, and getting away with it. Right, and you can go on. There's so many things that they keep doing. And I know I don't want people to feel that I'm ponging Trinidad or I'm anti-Trinidad, but I'm dealing with the facts. And for Caricom, Caricom has to be successful, right? But all the members, all the parties need to play by the same rules, and they have to respect each other. Right? If you don't, if you're not treating somebody properly, it shows you're not respecting them. If I start talking to you, Timothy, or treating you different, how you feel. It's the same thing. Countries, it's the same thing. We need to get, and that's where, our people who are negotiating has to do a better job, has to hold, carry a stronger bargain, so that Guyana will get its due. Guyana needs to get our due, right? And we can't continue like this. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Tim, do you think that the private sector, regional private sector, ought to play a greater role at the regional discussions, or the discussions at the regional level? Oftentimes, or currently what is happening, you have a number of persons who are bureaucrats and who are public servants, or civil servants who sometimes might not be familiar with the issues of the private sector as intimately as Paul, for example, or yourself are. Now, or you yourself are. Now, do you think that some mechanism ought to be there in the regional architecture to provide for that? And if so, how do you envision that?
Definitely, Richard. I think there is a role for the regional private sector to play, especially at quoted meetings, because as Paul just alluded to, the issue with sugar into Trinidad, right? And we can go on with cement, and we can do the flip coin there with cement, right? Guyana has been at the mercy of Trinidad. We've had them take us to court on cement, right? If you look at the CCJ, there's no country in Caricom that has utilized the CCJ greater than Trinidad and Tobago who is not a part of the CCJ, right? So that is to tell you how well they have worked Caricom to their benefit. And it's unfortunate that they have to take the brunt of the discontent and the failings of Caricom, but they have caused this onto themselves, right? So the issues that Paul have said on it is there's nobody else to blame, but Trinidad is to blame themselves if you're going to have the discontent, because we have this conversation, or we've had this conversation with the Chamber of Commerce. Some of the Chamber of Commerce in the region, they all have the same problem. And when their ministers and their government officials go to the meetings at Coated, or their heads of government meeting at Caricom, the information that we have may not have been articulated to the best, right, interpretation of the private sector's feeling at those meetings. And that's why it plays a pivotal role that the private sector gets involved and gets a saying. And yes, you're going to say, well, get your ministry and do that. But then when you go to, I mean, we've seen the honey issue raised at Coated, and the agriculture minister who is representing that country gets up and goes to a 2-hour bathroom break when that topic is being talked about, just to avoid that topic. You know, that's the kind of nonsense and waste of time that we see when it comes to meetings of Caricom. And if the private sector can get a seat at the table, then you will always have the regional players calling for their countries to exit that regional integration, which is, I mean, if we look at our economy, Prime Minister Motley said it, you know, that we, in our meetings with her, and that's why the chamber is working with Suriname and Barbados to come together and to kind of have our economies and see how we can reduce shipping costs, see how we can contribute to each other's economy, and where we're short, you know, where we can mesh and work collaboratively. Because if we don't do it, I mean, nobody's listening to us on the Caricom level. So we have to do it by ourselves, bilaterally and multilaterally. So going back to the original question, yes, we need to get a seat at the table. We need to play an integral part of the discussions, and they need to understand where we are coming from, because not all the time they're willing to listen. And sometimes when you put the right people in the room and you don't have somebody from the public sector who doesn't really understands the fight of the private sector, because a lot of us, and especially Guyana, right, we have, I mean, as big as the largest company in Guyana, the chairman and the CEO is very active in those businesses, and they know the plight of the company, and they can really say to that what the plight is. And a lot of the times, you know, we're the ones that need to be in the room. We need to, you know, that when we got into the room, I think it was a pre-Coated meeting at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and how many things we saw trying to slip onto the table through back doors and everything. I mean, you know, it's funny that said household items. Trinidad applied for a waiver of the CET on household items. So he said, what are the household items? Safety boots, safety helmet, safety jackets, you know, respirators. Like, That's safety equipment. That's not household items. You know,
Very safe in the household.
very safe in your household. But that's the type of thing that we deal with, and that's why it's important, right? Because the private sector has no time to sit down whole day and listen to somebody talk for 3-4 hours about one issue. We deal with multiple issues quickly and get to the point. Let's get results. We are result-oriented people. Business community is results-oriented. We would solve all the problems.
Yeah, Tim, definitely. And I think just before we go to a break, I want to mention, it's a very important thing that we are able to utilize Caricom, particularly leverage Caricom for business growth and business development as other countries have successfully done over the years. As a more developed country, or what we call an MDC, quote unquote, in Caricom, we are one of a couple of countries that are classified as an MDC. We do make a substantial contribution to the coffers of Caricom. If I'm not mistaken, it's somewhere around 500 million Guyana dollars, about 2.5 million US thereabouts annually, if I am not mistaken. I think that's the amount. And so we really should not be paying membership to an organization or to a treatise and a charter if the net benefit of it is not accruing to the country. And so we have to be able to craft innovative ways and strategies, and also utilize our newfound position as an oil and gas producing country, and one of the leaders in energy in the Caribbean, or to be the leader in the Caribbean in energy in the near future, and utilize that position to leverage the Caricom and drive development in the country. With that being said, with those words, I will ask the moderator, the background folks, request that we perhaps go to a short break before we come back for the wrap-up session as we begin to draw the program to a close. It's certainly been a pleasure chatting so far with these gentlemen, and please do stay with us as we go to a short commercial break.
AllFromOneSupplier.com has all your grocery needs, plus all of your West Indian items. Purchase all your groceries and all your West Indian items from one place and get free delivery to your homes and free shipping. AllFromOneSupplier.com has free deliveries locally in New York and free shipping to all U.S. states. Our shoppers choose the best items, packaged nicely, and delivered to your home. We have all your grocery needs and all your West Indian items, a one-stop shop. So place all your orders on allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. That's online at allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. Get all your groceries and all your West Indian items from allfromonesupplier.com with free deliveries and free shipping to all U.S. states. TravelSpan now has travel and shipping services. Shop online and deliver to TravelSpan to handle all of your shipping to Guyana and Trinidad. TravelSpan brings 26 years of experience in the travel business. TravelSpan will clear your items and have it available at any of our offices in Guyana or Trinidad. So go online and purchase your item, then let TravelSpan handle all the shipping. Shop and ship made easy with TravelSpan, with offices in New York, Georgetown, Berbice, West Coast Demerara, and Trinidad. TravelSpan, serving you with your airlines and shipping needs. Call in New York 718-845-0437, and in Guyana call 227-1701. That's in New York 718-845-0437, and in Guyana 227-1701. And in Trinidad call 672-2060. That's 672-2060. AllFromOneSupplier.com is promoting Gaisuku sugar as a way to support Guyana sugar industry. Purchase your Gaisuku sugar from AllFromOneSupplier.com along with your West Indian and American groceries. Purchasing Gaisuku sugar is a good fate gesture to help restore the sugar industry. AllFromOneSupplier.com has free shipping and delivery, and we ship to all states and free deliveries in New York. Log on to AllFromOneSupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. That's AllFromOneSupplier.com or 718-551-3292. TravelSpan offers all airlines, such as American, Caribbean, and JetBlue. So let TravelSpan compare all airlines and offer you the best fare. Call TravelSpan at 718-845-0437 for the lowest deals between New York, Miami, and Guyana. That's TravelSpan at 718-845-0437. Call TravelSpan in New York at 718-845-0437, Georgetown at 227-1701, or Berbice at 337-4287. In New York, 718-845-0437, Georgetown 227-1701, or Berbice 337-4287, and West Coast Demerara at 269-0140. Let TravelSpan book you the best deals for you and your families.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this edition of Globespan, where we're chatting with Mr. Paul Cheong and Mr. Timothy Tucker, both private sector leaders in their own right, about local content, business, Guyana's development, and overall private sector development, and how we can grow Guyana. We have had, or we have touched on a number of topics so far, very pertinent and very relevant. We have about maybe say 13 minutes more before we wrap up. So I would perhaps take a couple of maybe questions or frame some questions from what our viewers and listeners have been asking tonight. Tim, I see one person here. What are the desired outcomes from local content policy? And that's a very important question because that actually tells us what we should or how we should frame the policy and or legislation. What, in your view, are the desired outcomes or maybe the main desired outcomes from the local content?
The main desired outcome is the participation of locals in the the newfound industry, and the wealth that is associated with that industry. So you have to create, right? Create local capacity in that industry. We've never done this before. If you look out there, right, at this point in time, there's what, 4 or 5 oil blocks that went out, and there's a whole host of others, right? At some point, the country will develop additional oil blocks, and those oil blocks would go through a developmental phase, surveying phase, and the more that we open the door for the local for locals, because I just don't want to say the private sector, right? But local employment and skilled persons and improving, because that industry, of course, doesn't attract a high amount of persons in terms of under their employment, right? It's the more of the spin-offs that really has a high number of employments, but there's a lot of technical employment, and we can really hone in on that and get our local engineers and everything up to be petroleum engineers that they can work anywhere else in the world. If you have if you have, let's say, Venezuela open back up, and you're able to so many different countries. There's a whole basin here, the Guyana basin, and if you have more development going on there, then Guyanese that now have the capacity to work in the oil and gas sector, whether providing goods or services, or some sort of tier 1, tier 2 contracting for that industry, can now go and bid for jobs elsewhere: Brazil, Suriname, Venezuela, in the US, in Trinidad, elsewhere. So the fact is, the desired outcome is always to build the capacity of the locals, so that we can actually maybe, if we have local oil companies here, and we can really harness the benefits of this extractive industry. So the idea is of course, it's naturally to build Guyana and build Guyanese, build capacity locally.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, though, we do have a population that is just 750,000. And of that, the workforce is at maximum around 400,000. Therefore, there naturally will be a role, or there exists a role for migrant labor in the country. And Paul, I just want to hear perhaps your thoughts on this. What role do you think, Paul, migrant workers play in aiding the development of Guyana and the private sector in particular?
I mean, Guyana, in terms of its population size, is a village when you compare to other countries. I mean, large countries. I mean, 750,000 people is a village in China or India, right? So, and again, our geographic size is huge. I mean, relatively to our population, we're the size of the UK, all right, Guyana. So to develop this country, we need more human capital, we need more labor and we need more people, right? So definitely, if we want to develop at a pace which we should to catch up, because for too long we've been, I know we've moved from a highly indebted poor country to a lower middle income now, but we have a far way to go to reach a developed country, and we need to at least, we would like to see in our lifetime that Guyana is a developed country, that we can, benefit of see all the positives that happen in developed country. We have a good economy, the service, the level of service, and so on. And so to do that, to achieve those things, we'll need to have a good immigration, policy for people to come in, but you need, we need the right skill set. We must understand what we need, in what areas we have a deficit, so that we can have strategies to attract people in those areas. You don't want, people to come that, will be competing with the Guyanese. We have to, so the strategy is important, and understanding, as I said, understanding what we need is also important to be successful in that regard. But yes, we have to, and Guyana, we live in exciting times. I want to say, guys, we live in I know we still have a lot of things to fix, but and we will, work. We have to work together to get them fixed, because we in the private sector, if we sit, anybody, if you sit and accept things, then you're going to continue that way. But if we start developing strategies in which we can get things fixed one by one, and change things, then yes, we'll make Guyana the place it ought to be, right? We ought to be far better than where we are at this point in time. But that said, there's nothing that we can do about that now. But what we can do is our effort to bring change and to make this country develop can change. And when said change, we can accelerate our efforts to do that. And we have to. We don't have a choice at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that, and also the very inspiring words that you're providing there to the viewers and listeners tonight. I just want to begin to wrap up this discussion with something that is very important. Tim, of course, we have seen that the government has put forward its draft local content policy. I know that the GCCI, the organization which you now lead, has commented extensively on the local content policy. Just two very quick things on it. One, are you satisfied with the developments that you have seen in the local content policy? That's one. And secondly, there is that concept that is included about ring fencing, which means closing certain industries in the oil and gas sector in its procurement for Guyanese only. One, are you satisfied with that local content policy? And two, what industries do you think should be ring fenced? And with that, I'll draw my question to a close.
It's a better policy than we've had before. It's probably the best policy that has been presented to us so far. There are a lot of things that we would like change, added, modified. This is the first draft of this is their first draft, this government's first draft. And I know we're working, we've pointed out to them, and they've had extensive consultations. So I know there's a lot of things that they want to change and add to it. This is not, in its present form, will not work. It has to, you have to have those changes and those modifications. And then, of course, as I've said on many occasions, that once it's put into place, then you would have to have a continuous review period, of course. And we must take into consideration that Guyana is now 6 years since we discovered oil. So there's a lot of things that we would have, started doing already in country. To answer your, I hope that answers your first question. Your second question is in terms of industries to be ring fenced. There are industries, a lot of the service industries, a lot of the supplying and different logistics that should be ring fenced, and things like transportation and logistics and there's lower things that rentals and that sort of thing that we can go down, really look at and see that yes, Guyana has 100% capacity in these fields, but before we ring fence anything, we must make sure that we guarantee that we have the capacity locally to provide that service or whatever we're going to be ring fenced. Because the last thing we want to do is to ring fence something that we can't provide, and then the whole policy has to be dumped, right? So it's better off to say, listen, let us make sure that we do a good capacity survey. We make sure that we know that we have the capacity to attain 100% local participation in this particular service, and then ring fence it. I have no problem with ring fencing, but I have a problem with ring fencing things when we don't know our capacity, because if we do that, then we run into trouble, and then we start giving waivers, and then the whole policy is left to 2 or 3 people to decide whether or not they grant a waiver in a particular field, right? And sometimes nothing goes out, something doesn't go out for tender, or something doesn't go to the public domain, and they said, oh, there's nobody to do that in Guyana, you ring fence it. And this time there's 100 people to do it, and it could have been done. So we have to be careful with ring fencing. You definitely need to know your capacity in order to ring fence. And that is what I don't want to go deeper into it, because I don't want to give you a list of things and then really and truly we can't. And then somebody quoted me on this program saying, well, Timothy said that we got 100% capacity in this. I think, just out of a logic nature, I think some degree of logistics, some degree of transportation, and some degree of some of the basic services that are listed in that local content policy can be ring fenced, but we must have proof that it can be done 100% by Guyanese before we ring fence anything.
Definitely, and that is the reason why I asked the question, because I wanted us to get to the point where we understand in the public domain that what we need to do is to be able to really and thoroughly understand or comprehend the capacity of the private sector, what the issues are, and then how we work together collaboratively to be able to drive development of the entire private sector forward through targeted strategic interventions, and also by fixing many of the macro issues which we have. With that, gentlemen, I'll invite you to give your closing remarks, any last words which you want to say to the viewers and listeners here this evening before we wrap up. So I'll go with Paul first. Paul?
Yeah. You know, as I said earlier, you know, we live in exciting times, and you know, lots of stuff happening in the country. I mean, not only with oil, but the development of Guyana, and the private sector, and the people of this country, all of us. I mean, the private sector and everyone need to come together and join and ensure that they lift both in terms of their education level, I mean, study and develop themselves, you know, and so that they can be better equipped to participate in the new economy, in the new Guyana, and to their benefit. And so that, you know, Guyanese, you know, we have a good work ethic. When you see Guyanese go abroad and all over the world, they're in top position. So we have the know how to get things done, and we're very creative people, right? With oil, I know that there are lots of country that went a country in terms of their work ethic. The people that went in a downward spiral after the discovery. We call it the Dutch disease. We can't allow ourselves to get into that mode. I think we need to, as a people, as a nation, we need to work hard, identify the areas that we need to develop, identify the skills that we need, the university, the technical institute, and all the other learning agencies need to put together good programs that they can roll out to the people so that they can be better equipped to participate. I think once that is done, once everyone play their part, I mean, yes, you know, local content will be a success, and the country will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Some very important points that you made there. And of course, we have to be able to understand many of these issues from a broad perspective and then see how we can map them down, which I think is the thrust of what you were essentially getting at. Tim, any final remarks from you?
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, it's important that we realize that local content is not just a terminology for the private sector to enrich themselves, right? It's when we fight for local content, we're fighting for people to have access to the benefits. We're looking to bridge that gap between the rich and the poor. We're looking to raise these basic standards of living of those of us who have stayed here for all years and, you know, battled through blackouts, long lines for fuel, forex, unavailable forex, travel restrictions, lack of a credit card, and just the all around, you know, proper education and just the basic things that we look at in life. Local content is to drive all of that for us to lift this country, and we have to do it. And local content speaks of being Guyanese. There's no part of the local content policy that speaks to Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, Amerindians, or anything. It speaks and it calls it Guyanese. We are one, right? We have to realize we're one. We are in it together. This is for all of us. We have to build our capacity, as Paul said. We have to put in the hours. The old, what's this saying? Get rich or die trying. So, you know, it's really us honing in on what we want to do. We can't be, you know, the old saying, jack of all trades, master of none. We have to figure out what we want and master it, and provide the highest standard, and not just to the foreigners that come on to our shores, but provide the highest standard to our fellow Guyanese. We must be able to realize that we all here in this country are entitled to the best quality service, the best products, the best education, and the best of everything. And that is what, right, our natural resources should give us. The best of everything. We mustn't only dream of walking on a sidewalk in a foreign country, or turn on running water, or drink from the pipe in a foreign land. We must be able to get that here, and we must be able to do that in our lifetime. It mustn't be something that our children got to dream about, right? But my father lived in a country that had all those things when he was growing up, right? Because that was, we were a colony then. You know, the British had to provide that for us, or they would get riots in the streets. But unfortunately, you know, we went through a transition period. It's time now that, you know, that we provide this for ourselves. It's actually, nobody can provide it for us. We have to work hard, lift ourselves out of this, use the things around us, the tools that are there in terms of our natural resources are the roads to take us out of poverty. And we need to use it, and use it well.
Thank you very much for that, Timothy. I think you have touched on a point that a lot of you would have made this evening. Said that essentially the natural resources of Guyana must be utilized for the development of the people in Guyana, and definitely that is something that we hope is going to happen. I hope that the oil and gas sector is one that is able to spur that forward as a catalyst for change and for development in Guyana. Of course, we know the oil and gas sector is not the only extractive industry that we have here in Guyana, but it certainly will mammoth all of them, perhaps all of them combined, when it is at its peak of production. So with those few words, gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much for being here this evening. It certainly has been a very informative discussion. I was certainly informed of a number of various points which I was not, and I'm certain, and looking at the comments box, I'm certain that our viewers enjoyed it too. I would like to thank you on behalf of myself, the viewers and listeners, and Globespan for providing us with this platform, but also providing us with your knowledge. And so thank you, gentlemen, both very much.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you